Yes, today, good afternoon, or good morning rather, is Thursday, December the 3rd. And today we're going to continue our discussion of Rome and its civilization, its culture. Hopefully, you took the time to have a look at this YouTube video that I put on your assignment page. It's only like 10 minutes long. And I think it's pretty intriguing because it talks about the personal habits of Romans living in the city of Rome. So during the so-called golden age of Rome. But for now, let's go back to our study guide. And we are here, Roman numeral 4. And some of this we've already went over. But anyway, the period of time from 31 BC, which is the Battle of Actium. The Battle of Actium is where Octavian defeated Mark Antony and became Rome's first real Caesar. And the accession to power of Augustus Caesar until 183 AD. Actually, it's 180 AD. 183 AD, where the death of the Emperor Marcus Aurelius, and the beginning of the Russell Crowe film Gladiator, which I really hope that we can take an opportunity to see that when we return. That is an excellent film. It is referred to as the Pax Romana. I mean, I cannot show you clips of that film on the. I can't show you through here with me talking to you, narrating what the film was about, but I may slip in a few clips. I mean, if you ever watch the film, the first 20 minutes of that film are excellently done. You say, what does that mean? It shows a battle between the Romans and the Germans they were conquering. And I mean, it's one of the reasons why, even though you can get most films eventually on television, Netflix or whatever for free, it's one of the reasons why you need to go to theaters, because there are certain films that are just too big for television, or even the sound system in your home or whatever. There are certain films that you need to see in a theater. I remember seeing Gladiator for the first time, and I was impressed by the first 20 minutes because it shows this battle scene, and you're sitting there in this giant screen, and you see all these arrows flying through the air, lit in the morning sky, and and those kind of things. And here's the thing: to create this battle, unlike today, I really hate a lot of today's films because today's films use a whole lot of CGI to do anything like this. Like, for example, and I'm getting off the subject, but like, for example, the Lord of the Rings series. In the 90s, they did the 3 Lord of the Rings films, and they were well done, I thought. The orcs and the orcai had individual actors who wore individual makeup, and it looked good. Then came along The Hobbit, and The Hobbit, first of all, The Hobbit is shorter than any of the Lord of the Rings books, and they made it into 3 films of like 2 hours and more. And not only that, the worst part though for me was when it came to parts that showed these orcs and orcai, they were CGI. They were cartoons, and much of the film was a cartoon. Well, and that was different from the Lord of the Rings film. But of course, I'm sure that hiring some guy to do CGI versus hiring tons of actor extras and paying for makeup and all that kind of stuff. Anyway. But in the film Gladiator, they don't use CGI in that opening scene. They have people acting out parts, and they have a pitched battle, and it shows real tactics that they would have used during that time. In that film Gladiator, and maybe I'll have to slip it in there tomorrow. But is referred to that period of time from 31 BC to 183 AD is referred to as the Pax Romana, or Roman peace, which is utilized in your test, or the height of Greco-Roman culture. Under the Emperor Augustus Caesar, the great Roman poet Virgil wrote the Aeneid. Now, the Aeneid, you might recall, the Aeneid is about the founding of the city of Rome. By Aeneas, who, if you recall from the film Troy, Paris gives the sword of Troy to Aeneas, and he goes off and finds the city of Rome. So, Augustus admittedly borrowed much of the best of the Greek civilization and made it Roman, such as Greek art, Greek architecture, and Greek sculpture. I'm telling you, the Romans made concrete, and that was it. Otherwise, they took Greek ideas and expanded upon them, such as Greek art, architecture, and sculpture. And the Romans under Augustus, however, were a practical civilization, building aqueducts, bridges, roads. And yeah, the Romans built roads. Here's the interesting thing, though. When they built those roads, the Romans could not make curves. And so all turns in Roman roads were 90 degrees. There we go here, and here's something I need to get around, 90 degrees, and go. So Marcus Aurelius, though, aside from being the father of Commodus, and there is a Commodus, by the way. In fact, in watching that film Gladiator, at first I didn't like it. Yeah, at first I didn't like the film Gladiator because it was too fantastic. Fantastical. It was unbelievable. Yeah, okay, so there's a Marcus Aurelius, and, let's accept for the moment that there's this guy named Maximus. But then a lot of the things that happen in the film, for example, the scenes in the Colosseum where tigers pop up out of the ground. I was like, they didn't do that. Well, I went back and did my research, and guess what? They did. Yeah, the Romans built the Colosseum with trap doors and things where, without suspecting, creatures could pop out as a way to thrill the audiences. Yeah. And then toward the end, of course, in the end, Maximus, who, by the way, does not exist, and Commodus, the Roman emperor who murdered his father and assumes the role of emperor, fight in the Colosseum. And I'm like, no way will an emperor risk himself fighting in the Colosseum. Well, sure enough, Commodus does. That's one, and the real Commodus did that. However, once again, just like in the film, that hopefully you'll see, that right before this combat is supposed to happen in the Colosseum, Commodus takes a stiletto. A stiletto is a short knife about this long, and stabs Maximus in the lung. And then they have their fight. And see, that's the thing. Commodus did that. Commodus fought in the arena because it thrilled him, but he only fought people who were wounded already. And they would rig the fight that way. So, yeah. So anyway, Marcus Aurelius, aside from being the father of Commodus, and no, there was no Maximus. Actually, I once read that the closest historical likeness to Maximus was probably Spartacus. Now you're saying, who's Spartacus? Spartacus was a slave. I mean, he was a slave. He was a gladiator during the reign of Claudius, who actually stages a slave revolt. Yeah, Spartacus escapes from the gladiatorial training camp, and he raises together an army of gladiators and slaves, and they actually threaten to conquer Rome. But of course, you can't beat those Romans. Spartacus wanted to actually, he didn't really want to go fight Rome because he knew he'd lose a lot of his people. He had men, women, and children. And so what he did, Spartacus paid a bunch of pirates to give them a ride across the Mediterranean, find some place where they could, be by themselves. The Roman government, of course, ever being crafty, paid the pirates more. And so the pirates never showed up. And pirates never showed up. And Spartacus and his entourage find themselves surrounded by Roman legions with their women and children, and so they were forced to surrender. And in one of the most famous scenes in cinema history, the Romans said, "We'll let the rest of you guys go back to your lives as slaves, and nothing will happen to you if you tell us who is Spartacus." And suddenly, all of Spartacus' men jump up and say, "I'm Spartacus, I'm Spartacus." Spartacus, everybody knew, was going to get crucified. Of course, the other side of that coin was, if they didn't tell the Romans, they would be crucified. And it was not an unrealistic thing that the Romans would place the bodies of their enemies on crosses all along the main roads. And yeah. Pardon me. So let's continue. We're talking about Marcus Aurelius, by the way. So he also wrote Meditations, which was a book that was a study of classic Stoic philosophy. Hadrian, we've already talked about him, the great builder. He was called Hadrian the Builder, actually. He built, as it says there, Pantheon. Pantheon is the ancient world's most perfect structure, which looked like that. And it's wonderful. See, here's the thing. I took this picture myself, 1989. And in 1989, my first trip to Europe, I went to Europe, went to the city of Rome, and unfortunately, 1989 is the year before 1990. Oh, duh. 1989 is the year before 1990, and that year, 1990, Rome was going to host the World Cup. And what that meant was everything in Rome was going to get a cleaning, a renovation. And you couldn't go in, like this place. Yeah, this is the Pantheon, and it is the most perfect structure of the ancient world. Inside here, like I told you before, there's a dome. And there's a dome, and this ceiling up here is completely unsupported. And it's like 150 feet off the ground. And that is an engineering marvel that you're able to place an unsupported concrete ceiling. And I mean, the Romans were clever in how they did it. They simply, as the dome got closer and closer to the top, the width of the roof got thinner and thinner, and not only thinner, but in mixing the concrete, the Romans used a trick that is still used today. They took clay jars and dropped inside the concrete mix. The clay jars occupy space, and inside the clay jars is nothing but air. Air doesn't weigh anything. And so we had all these small clay jars in there, and it honeycombs and makes the ceiling lighter. But yeah, it's quite incredible. Anyway, back to the matter at hand. So, and he built Hadrian's Wall, which was a wall that separated England and the Romans from the so-called Picts, P-I-C-S, the wildlings. If you ever wonder where that term came from, it came from Roman history. The Romans wanted to keep the Scots, these Picts, these wildlings, out of the empire because they couldn't handle them. And so they built a wall, just like on Game of Thrones, only Hadrian's wall was a little shorter. Nero, as said, does get a bad reputation that he probably does not deserve. That bad reputation is the killer, the great killer of Christianity. And it's not that he had a moral objection to it. The fact of the matter is, Nero was the emperor who was on the throne when the apostles Peter and Paul were taken to Rome, both of whom end up being executed. Peter was crucified upside down, as we're going to learn in the next chapter, and Paul was beheaded. Paul was beheaded because he was born a Roman citizen. Yeah, the Romans killed each other better. All right, Diocletian, though. Diocletian, Nero, once again, because, and I was talking about he got a bad reputation he doesn't deserve. The math doesn't add up. Once again, if I had to explain this again, Jesus died around 35 AD, around there. And Nero ruled around 70 AD. That's 35 years. That's not enough time for the Christian movement to gain the numbers that Nero was supposed to have killed. It just doesn't work out mathematically. Diocletian, who actually, now Diocletian was one of those Roman emperors who actually tried to stamp out Christianity. He launched what were called general anti-Christian drives. In other words, by law, any Christian found throughout the empire was to be taken and, if not killed right there, brought back to Rome and to serve as competition for the lions in the Colosseum. Yeah. So yeah, Diocletian did that, and so did Decius. Anyway, divided the empire though, and actually lived through retirement, although he was guilty of the last real attempt to stamp out Christianity. Okay, well, one more thing. The Romans used their building and sculptures and architecture as a way of telling the rest of the world, letting the rest of the world know that Roman culture was superior to their culture. Yeah, I mean, the Romans called non-Romans barbarians. And the word barbarian comes from the baying or barking of dogs. It was basically the Romans and the Greeks making fun of non-Roman Greeks, saying that their language sounds like dogs barking, bar, 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 or sheep baying. And so hence the word barbarians. So, and to let them know you're subject to Roman authority. Yeah, Romans, yeah. Most civilizations actually prospered during the Pax Romana. See, that's the thing. When the Romans came, and yes, trust me, the Romans were not nice people, which is the answer to your next question. You don't control an empire that stretches from one end of Europe to the other for hundreds of years by being a nice guy. It's impossible. So how did Rome control that empire? And, well, I mean, you look no further than the Christmas story. After Jesus and his parents had escaped Bethlehem, what did those Roman soldiers do in the Bethlehem area? Answer, they took all children 2 years of age and under, all boys, and stuck them with a sword. Now there's your answer. And how does a human being do that? The Romans did it. Once again, how do you control an area so big? Can't be nice. So anyway, but most civilizations, when the Romans were there, actually prospered, actually made money. Their economies improved. Because one of the things the Romans brought with them, taxes, but they also brought law and order. The bandits were wiped clean from the road. The pirates wiped out of the ocean by the Romans. The Romans brought order. stability. Everybody hated the Romans because they were jerks and the taxes were heavy, but they brought stability. As it says there, emperors often honor themselves with construction like forums. Forums were wide open spaces within the city where you have public demonstrations, like the crownings of emperors, or like parades celebrating a conquering general. Like, for example, when Augustus wanted to bring Cleopatra back to Rome, that would have been done publicly in the forum. So everybody could, yay, Augustus, you got that Egyptian witch. And in Rome, there's the Forum of Augustus, the Forum of Caesar, the Forum of Trajan. Trajan also built his own column to commemorate the conquest of the Dacians. The Dacians were these enemies in Eastern Europe that the Romans could not triumph over for years and years, and Trajan was able to finally do that. And so he built a column, and this column is 100 feet tall, approximately. And around the column, spiraling to the top, is the story of the defeat of the Dacians. And of course, nobody on the ground can read the top, but yeah, it's that story. And one last thing, basilica. A basilica is a building that has a giant open space in the middle, supported by columns. Giant open space in the middle, supported by columns. And we're going to end here. You have enough to look at. So, yes, goodbye.